All right, everyone, welcome back. Welcome to the third episode of the ABC Hockey Show. Again, thanks for listening to us. Thanks for commenting. Thanks for emailing. Again, if you have any questions, you have any comments, either feel free to leave it at the bottom of the video or please email us at abchockeyshow@gmail.com. We'd love to hear what your thoughts are. We'd love to hear any questions. We'd love to hear any topics you'd like for us to discuss. Considering the date, here we are on the 6th. I think it's only apropos that we get into the trade deadline as it occurred last week. Apologies that we're a little late in getting to that, but here we are. Ben, do you want to start us off talking about the Rangers trade acquisitions right around the deadline? I know they had a little bit of activity, not exactly on the deadline, but why don't we kind of jump into their transactions the past 2 weeks or so?
Well, sure. Let's start with the Rangers. I mean, so their main move, as we know, was picking up Brandon Smith. So Rangers traded pick next year in 2017 and pick 2018. Smith is I want to call him a 3-4 in terms of D. I don't think he's a 1-2. I think he's better than the 5-6. I think he's a second pair D guy. And the Rangers, like everybody else that we talked about before, need some depth on their D line. They actually have a couple of injuries now. And I think it was just a low level risk. A couple of picks in the second and third round. You get a guy who could be there good this year and could help you solidify your back line. They really actually didn't do much else. They've called up a couple of guys from the AHL. They kept, as we talked about, they kept their forward team intact. Their bigger problem is injury, but in terms of their moves, they kind of stood pat and just made their one move for the D-man, which was a big reaction, in my opinion, to Washington getting the biggest guy on the market, Kevin Shattenkirk.
So,
what do you think of that deal?
Yeah, first off, to go back to the Brendan Smith trade, I had mentioned last episode that I thought Brendan Smith was a good fit for the Penguins. He's a true defenseman, a real defensive defenseman, I should say. And I was actually a little disappointed to see that we couldn't make that trade. I'll get into the Penguins trades in a minute, but I think the Rangers made a good move. He shores up the D. I agree with you. He's not a 1. He's not a 2. He probably could be your fourth defenseman. So the bottom of your top 2 pairs, if you need it, he's probably more comfortable in that 5th or 6th slot. But still, I think it's a great move by the Rangers. Again, adding some depth to their defense. You can never have too many defensemen in the league. So I think it's a great move. Going to the Shattenkirk trade, I was extremely disappointed to see that we didn't end up with him.
Absolutely.
I was really upset. You see that Washington basically said, this is our year. If not this year, then we're not sure. And that's okay. But, I think, let's just say as a Penguin fan, I was really disappointed to see a strong team get even stronger when they were able to trade for him. I think they also traded for him. I could be wrong about this, but I think it was a kind of a defensive move to block the other teams, aka Rangers, Penguins, etc., from getting Shattenkirk, at the trade deadline.
I wonder how many teams were really in, because I was reading that the Rangers made an offer, but kind of stuck with not trading certain pieces, not trading a current NHL roster forward, not trading. They didn't really have a first-round pick to trade. So I wonder who else was in on him for the level. Washington traded, I think, a first-rounder and a second-rounder.
Yeah.
Yeah. And 2 players. I mean, I wonder who else was near that haul.
It's interesting.
The Rangers weren't.
I wasn't sure. I wasn't as familiar with the players that got traded. I wasn't sure if that was more of a cap move by the Capitals or if that was actual trade value that the Blues were looking for.
I don't know. It's a good question. Either way, they got a first and a second.
Yeah, which is huge. I'm not saying I wanted the Penguins to give up a first and a second. That being said, I wouldn't have been completely upset had they given them up.
Well, you think that the Penguins, if they got Shattenkirk, are become a favorite again? Because right now Washington is by far the favorite in the East, right? They were top team before, now they got the best player in the market.
Yeah, so I think their defense looks great. They've got Orpik, who's like your true defenseman. They've got Niskanen, who's a goal-scoring defenseman, can move the puck. Shattenkirk can score goals. I mean, they're deep both on the offensive side and the defensive side. So I think you have to say Washington's the Holtby is freaking ridiculous. I think I saw some stat that he hasn't lost a game in regulation this 2017
What?
year. I think he was 19-0-1 or something in
That's
the games he
unbelievable.
played in 2017. I could be wrong. Maybe someone fact check me. Write to us if you want to correct me. abchockeyshow@gmail.com. But I saw a ridiculous stat like that. Holtby is playing out of his mind. And realistically, they were probably the favorites last year to win the cup. Uh, obviously getting derailed by the Penguins, but I would say yeah. So Washington this year is definitely the favorites. Then we start looking at what would have happened. So if the Penguins had gotten Shattenkirk, I don't know if that moves us up automatically to the number one spot, but it definitely puts us in great contention with Washington, or would have put us in a much better contention with them. We are extremely injured right now, especially on the defensive front. So Connor Sheary just came back from injury. He's already making his mark. He scored a goal last night, game-winning goal that is. So that's nice to see. Brandon Rust is also injured. He should be back relatively soon. But then we go to our defense, and which has always been suspect. And we've got Daly, Mata, and Letang, who is essentially 3 out of our top 6, arguably 2 out of our top 4 defensemen who are not playing right now.
What's with Letang? I read something that he's out for a while.
So the Penguins, of course, as they do, listed him as day to day, but it's an upper body injury. There's a lot of speculation going around. People are wondering if it has to do with the stroke he had. People are wondering if it's concussion related. He does have a history, unfortunately, of both stroke and concussion. So nothing is really clear. I went back to the game where he got injured, which was back on the 21st of February, and I didn't notice a hit specifically, but again, I wasn't able to watch the entire recap or rewatch, I should say, the entire game. So I don't know. It's hard to tell. My guess would be it's something related with concussion. That's why they're being so hush hush about it. That's my guess.
That's what usually happens.
Yeah.
The upper body usually means concussion. They usually don't tell you a thing.
Yeah, and because Letang is out, that really hurts our power play, which really, I think, cuts into our ability to be a contender. Now, moving nicely into who the Penguins got during the trade deadline, we received 2 defensemen. I think they were both really, really solid trades that'll help us this year. Should have zero impact in years to come, just because the guys are both 100 years old. But picking up Hainsley for a second round next year, I thought was great. We traded away Christo, but he forward from the AHL, no big deal. So basically gave him up for a second round pick next year, which doesn't really bother me all that much. I say next year, that's next year's draft, but the 2017 draft, just to be clear. And then we picked up Straight for a 4th rounder in 2018. So interesting. Straight had to get to the Penguins vis-a-vis the Lightning. I'm not sure if that was Philly just playing games and not wanting to trade with a rival state team, or if that was actually they planned on trading him to Tampa Bay, and Tampa Bay wanted to flip him. I'm not sure which it is, but one way or the other, I'm glad to have him. They're both making their mark. Strite is a guy who could actually, I don't want to say replace, because you can never really replace Letang on the power play, but he's definitely a guy who can eat up minutes on a power play and be somewhat productive. Between him and Schultz, I think the two of them make a really nice combo for the power play. And then Hainsey's a guy who led Carolina's defensemen in PK minutes, and that's huge for us. We've been relatively poor this year on the special teams, and not the power play, that is. I think we're 3rd or 4th, but the PK has been rough for us. I think that has to do a lot with the fact that Hagelin and Sheary and Rust have all been injured, so our main forward penalty killers have all missed over 10 games each this season, and that does something to your PK. But for the most part, adding depth, both as a defenseman and someone who can eat up some penalty or PK minutes, it was really, really nice. I think the other thing that the Penguins did well at the trade deadline, and we touched upon this last episode, is they didn't move Fleury. And I think that at this point, two things. One, we noticed that the Kings now have 100 goalies that they want to protect and none that they can. So Quick is going to get protected, which would mean that, unfortunately, they're going to have to leave what's his name from the Lightning unprotected. Bishop, thank
Oh,
you.
yeah.
So Bishop's going to be unprotected, and he's probably a better choice over Fleury if I'm Las Vegas, because Fleury comes with a higher price tag, and I believe Bishop's at a lower cap hit, so that's first. And Bishop's also younger. He might arguably be at this point, but who knows? But I think keeping two goalies right now is huge. We saw last night. Murray gave up 3 goals on 21 shots in the first period. Fleury came in and shut him down. We ended up winning 4-3 in a game we probably had no business winning. So look, I still think Murray is the future, but having a extra goalie, especially this year when our D is a little bit shaky, I think is not the end of the world. So I do like the no trade for Fleury, even if it means we lose him next year and get nothing in return.
Yeah, you ready for this? I'm going to say something bold. You ready?
Go for it.
If the Penguins do go on to win the Cup this year, and I just want to say, I hope that the whole team falls off some cliff somewhere and breaks all their legs before that happens. If the Penguins do go on to win the Cup this year, both Fleury and Murray will play a big part in that. I bet you what's going to happen is you're going to need both those guys down the stretch and through the playoffs. It just seems to happen that way. You need two guys to be solid in your nets during playoff runs.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think in a situation, for example, that Washington has, where Holtby's your clear number one, so even if he gives up 6 goals in a period, like he may not continue that one game, but he's in net the next night. I think
Right.
with a team like the Penguins, who, especially with the shaky D that we have this year, and even last year, our D was suspect, and Murray played great. I do think that there'll be nights where one of them is not playing well and the other one comes in, especially during a playoff run, especially during a deep playoff run like the NHL playoffs that goes almost as long as the NBA playoffs. So yeah, no, I totally would agree with that. I don't think that is absurd. I think that's whether fortunately or unfortunately, I think that the reality of our playoff run is going to ride on both those guys as opposed to one or the other.
And the playoff run, I'm considering that going in as the seeding also. I'm considering that going in for the run into and leading up to the playoffs, where you guys are going to be positioning for it. I don't know if it's going to be the number one. I think it's possible right now, but I don't think it's going to happen. It's going to be the 2 or the 3 for that home ice.
So let's get into that. Let's talk about the seeding right now. Let's talk about where it stands. So right now, Washington, Columbus, and Pittsburgh all have played 64 games. The Rangers have played 65, so one game in hand. But let's not play. Let's assume that they're all even. Washington has 95 points. Columbus has 88. Pittsburgh has 88. Columbus is the 2 because they have one more regulation overtime win. And then the Rangers have 84. So they're 4 points behind. Columbus and Pittsburgh are 7 points behind Washington. Let's just play this out. Where would you like, if you could pick any of the seating, where would you want to be sitting right now? You as the Ranger.
Oh, so I don't even have a question. So if you look at it, right? Washington, like you just said, Washington 95 points, number one. Columbus and Pittsburgh 2 and 3, each have 88 points. I think Columbus has one more regulation win, which puts them in the second seed. The Rangers have 84 points, makes them the first wild card, right? 4th in the Metro, first wild card.
Yep. Yeah, continue, yeah.
Montreal is the first team in the Atlantic, has 82 points. All 4 of those teams have more points than the first in the Atlantic. I want the Rangers to stop winning and only play enough to get the first wild card spot and play the Atlantic Division.
It's interesting. So you would like them to be the wild card for better or worse. You want them to just continue being the wild card and see how that rides out for you.
I want to play the crossover to the Atlantic Division. I don't love the way they do these standings overall. We get that conversation one day, but the points and how they rank these teams. But I do want the Rangers to take the easier route through Montreal, Ottawa, Boston, Toronto, Florida, Tampa Bay, whatever that combination becomes, rather than Washington, Columbus, and Pittsburgh, and maybe the Islanders if they do it. But it's going to be Washington, Columbus, Pittsburgh.
And you think that there's zero chance of making up 11 points on the Capitals?
For the Rangers?
Yeah.
1,000%. I think Pittsburgh and Columbus have a better shot of making up the number one, but I think Capitals are just too good. I think they're gonna finish with another. I could see them getting to 110, 108.
I mean, it's interesting. You probably have a different perspective. The Rangers have been so good this year on the road. I think, what do they have, 22 road wins, which is the most out of any team in the league. I mean, that is a ridiculous stat that probably goes partially to Hank, partially to the D. But I don't know. I feel like getting home series, so being the 2 seed, for example, is huge. Whereas if you go in as the wild card, unless a fluke happens where the Islanders or whoever comes in as the second wild card makes it all the way to the last round in the Eastern Conference Championships, that you guys will have a home series, right? Like you're going to be on the road for every series. And I just think that's tough. Again, for the Penguins, it's super tough. We are a much better home team than we are away team. So I don't know. I think I'd rather have that, even if it's a number two, where yeah, eventually down the road I've got to play Washington. But then if I beat Washington in round three, I get another home series, and then potentially whoever I play in the Stanley Cup, I could have a home series also, just because again maybe Minnesota's going to have more points, whatever it is, but there's a great chance to have 4 out of those 7 Stanley Cup games at home, as opposed to if you're the wild card, you're not getting any home games. Like it's just, uh, you know.
No, you're not. How much is home advantage mean in hockey right now? I'm not sure.
I mean, just if you want to just literally, sorry to cut you off, but the Penguins are 13, 12, and 5 away, so basically 500. At home,
yes.
At home, we're 27, 4, and 3.
To that point, the Rangers, like you said, have 22 wins on the road the most. The next best team in the Eastern Conference is Columbus with 18. The next best team overall is Chicago with 20 wins on the road. We know how good Chicago is.
Yeah, I don't want to see them in the cup. So
yeah, I like Chicago a lot. I think they're so strong.
I mean, they're always good. They've got deep. They're very deep. But yeah, no. But I'm just. But like, so for the Rangers, it's probably less of an issue. But for as a Penguin fan, if we could get the 2, I think we will beat Columbus, and then it'll be a crapshoot against Washington. If we're the 3 against Columbus, I think that changes everything. I mean, I think it's really an issue us being the away team. The extra, the last change is huge for us. We get the matchups we want. Crosby, Malkin get to line up whoever they want with. Like for me, I think just being the 2 for us is a lot better than being a wild card and having to play on the road. Just kind of my gut on it, but that's my take.
All right, interesting. Well, I mean, we're gonna see how they fall out in their seeding.
Yeah. All right, I think that's gonna wrap up this episode. Would love to hear all of your thoughts, all on the trade deadline, on the seeding, on where you'd like to see your team end up. Again, if you'd like to shoot us an email. We can be reached at abchockeyshow@gmail.com. Again, abchockeyshow@gmail.com, or feel free to leave a comment under this video, and we'll make sure to get back to you. Again, thanks for listening to us, and have a good one.
Thanks, guys.